Thank you, and congratulations on this vision and this collaboration that you've put forth, and a warm welcome to our panelists. We have a member of parliament with us, Thomas Pellerin Carlin, with my American accent on your French name, sorry. And we also have the signatories of the joint statement that we just heard about. So I would like to welcome Remy, Volker, Jochen, and we're gonna talk a bit about the vision set forth and on simplification. But at the heart of the conversation, there is this theme about competition and creating a more competitive Europe. There is this theme about where we are right now with 13 months after the EU Grid Action Plan has been set forth. So what achievements have been made and where are there gaps? And then for the second part of the conversation, I want to spend a little bit of time looking at forward-looking ideas and talk a bit more about your vision for the future. So with that said, let's get started. Johan, thank you very much for kicking us off with that conversation. So tell us more about how the Grid Action Plan, and again, with this lens about achievements and gaps, how does the Grid Action Plan help shift the focus of policymakers and all types of stakeholders, in particular business? Half the folks in this room are business. How does it help shift the focus of policymakers and other stakeholders towards building large-scale infrastructure projects?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think you already more or less said it. It's a shift in focus. Over the years, we have talked a lot about flexibility, smartening the grid, efficient usages, etc. These are all important components, but I think over the last year, or a couple of years, there's been a growing realization that we can only smarten so much. We can only improve our efficiencies to a certain level. We are going to need some physical infrastructure to provide the backbone of the green transition. And that focus shift, I think, is very well presented in the EU Grid Action Plan. We know the plan. There are lots of items on it, and I have been privileged enough to work on this supply chain issue. One of the best things about the approach to this is that it is a cooperative approach, a collaborative approach. And I think it should be noted that the EU Grid Action Plan, influential as it has been, does not include any legislative proposals. It was an outgoing commission, therefore the toolbox for legislation was not available. But I think the Grid Action Plan and the way that it has been received by stakeholders in Brussels also shows that we can do a lot, even without legislation. I'm a lawyer personally, so I'm a fan of regulation and legislation. But I do believe that there are merits to approaching this task through collaboration, perhaps rather than detailed regulation. And I think that's important. Has it made an impact on transmission projects? First of all, major transmission infrastructure projects are lengthy. That's one of the issues that we are facing, but as such, I don't think that I would be able to point to a specific project that has been helped or enabled or accelerated by the Grid Action Plan. But I think it will, in the sense that there is this shared urgency, sense of shared urgency that we need to do that, and that is across all sectors. The TSOs, the DSOs, politicians indeed, regulators. We have to, there's basically a growing understanding that we cannot do the green transition without the grid. And maybe this is not a surprising comment coming from a TSO, but I think it is an understanding that is shared beyond the TSO and the DSO community. I think that's really important. I would have liked to be able to state that this sense of urgency was also shared by the general public in Europe. I think that would have been very nice. And hopefully, at some point in time, it would also be more true than it would be if I said so today. Because I still think that this shared sense of urgency needs to be communicated, needs to be understood much better than it is today. I'm sure we are all sitting up here and you in the room committed to that, but I think there is a particular point or a particular task for the politicians at European level, but certainly also at national and the municipality level, to communicate very clearly that we can't have the green transition without somebody will have to look at some pylons. It's just not going to happen. And this communication and the value associated with it, so that people do not just see something that is unpleasant to the eye, but understand that this is about creating jobs, this is about supporting competitiveness in Europe, and it's about building a better future, a greener future. To have that sort of acceptance is really some work that we have ahead of us. So a shift in focus, but it's a shift in focus that is not done. It is a shift in focus that will be work in progress for us for quite some time. Shifting from that, just a short comment, I realize the time, is that one of the major challenges we're facing in Europe is the fact that we all have, if not identical, then at least similar target years and target dates and green transition targets across Europe, which basically means that everybody wants to buy the same sort of equipment at the same time and under a lot of time pressure. And that is, of course, sort of a big squeeze on the procurement processes and the supply chain. But, and this is my point, it is also a great opportunity. This is not just a problem. This is also an opportunity to rethink what we are doing, make it more flexible, make it faster, make it more simple. And the fact that there is such a pressure, sometimes you need the pressure to make bold decisions. And I hope that from that pressure, these bold decisions will emerge. So in that sense, yes, I do believe that this shared sense of urgency is important. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for really emphasizing that sense of urgency. I think that it's a really important theme, and especially bringing it to the public, and that's something that we'll refer to. In the last session, we talked a bit about the economic case and the business case, and when I speak about the economic case, I'm really thinking about the role of government and beyond government, but to make that case to the public about the direct and the indirect benefits of the transition. And those indirect benefits like job creation and cleaner air and strengthened economy, those are the things that help build that strong economic case and that shared sense of urgency. And it's something that across the board, I think we all need to work on how that narrative plays out. I want to turn to you, Thomas, because we have the privilege of having a member of parliament with us today to talk about this new legislative mandate that is on the table. What can you do as a member of parliament to support this agenda, in particular the grid piece and also the competitiveness of Europe? How do they come together in your view?
Hi, hello everyone. So I'm happy to be here. So maybe a few words on my background, because it will enlighten what I'm about to say. So I've been in politics for 5 to 6 months now. But I was a researcher for a decade, working specifically on energy, and so and that's also why I'm sitting now as an MEP in the ITRE committee as part of the Social Democratic political family. And I'm originally from Normandy, where we've got a lot of electricity grid and need for further expansion, especially to better connect with offshore wind and with our British neighbors. And as an MEP, I really welcome that joint commitment. The first thing that I think we need to have, also because we have a new commission and a new parliament, is to have a proper understanding of the situation. And just because I like to do quizzes, I'm going to ask you a question, to you, the audience. Over the last 15 to 16 years, do you think electricity demand in Europe has increased, remained flat, or decreased? If you think electricity demand in Europe has increased, please raise your arm. Okay. Who thinks electricity demand has remained flat over the last 16 years? And who think it has decreased? Okay. Okay, so I'm worried, guys. Like, how should me and my colleagues in the European Parliament agree on such a basic diagnosis while even you, the professionals, disagree among yourself? Thank God we have Eurostat. But the thing is, electricity demand in Europe since 2008 has decreased. We consume less electricity now than we did in 2008. And so I hear those political talks about electrification, and I agree with them. And I see the reality in the data because I remain first and foremost a researcher. And I'm like, electrification is not happening. And so that's obviously a big challenge. Why would a TSO expand the grid if there are no more electrons, or that not an additional electrons to be flown? And so my first call to you is to be more vocal on files where you're currently not vocal. And those are any type of legislation that has to do with electricity demand. In Parliament, there is now the possibility of a coalition between the conservative and the far-right groups. That coalition has a majority in Parliament, and they've been using that over the last few months to dismantle existing Green Deal legislation, or at least try to, on deforestation. But that same coalition can also dismantle existing legislation on heat pumps, existing legislation on ETS1 and the phase-out of free allowances that drives investment for electrification of the industry. And that very same coalition can also dismantle the CO2 standard for cars regulation, that is the regulation that pushes towards more electric vehicles. So all the discussion we're going to have now is irrelevant if you, as an industry, are not more vocal to make sure that we adopt the policies that are good for climate and that happen to lead to an increase in electricity demand. And really, the time is nigh. So that's the moment where we're having that discussion in Parliament. And to be fully clear, there is a key role of one political family, the Christian Democrats, with whom we've been working together over the last 74 years, the entire history of the European Union. But if the Christian Democrats choose to make a structural alliance with the far right, not only on deforestation law, but on CO2 standards for cars, on renewable energy directive, etc., that will lead to obviously public policy decisions that will go contrary to our climate goals, but also contrary to our economic competitiveness, because they would lock us in into fossil gas and oil demand rather than renewable electricity transported through the grid. So I was longer than I expected on that because apparently, I mean, to be honest, when I was asking you the question, I expected a consensus from you, the audience. Then how do we go from there with the Clean Industrial Deal? The Clean Industrial Deal will be presented by the Commission on February the 26th. And I think the date is also interesting because that would be 2 days after that very bleak anniversary of the 3-year of the war of Vladimir Putin against Ukraine and therefore against us. And here it would be important to underline the dimension of energy security and the fact that we Europeans will only be energy secure when we produce most of the energy that we consume. As long as we remain reliant on oil and gas, we will remain reliant on those political powers that are the Russian Federation, the dictatorship in Azerbaijan, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Governments that, to say the least, do not share our values nor our interest. So if we want to be serious on energy security, we need to make sure that the clean industrial deal is indeed clean, because that is the only way for us to be really secure. Vladimir Putin can cut oil and gas supplies to Europe, but it does not yet have the strength to stop the wind from blowing in the Baltic Sea or the sun from shining in the Mediterranean. And once we understand that, then we can have a proper discussion on how strategic investments in renewable electricity, in the transport grid, in the distribution grid, and in electricity demand is. And that will, in my view, unlock a lot of things. And that's the way I approach that. Because I'm first and foremost a researcher, but I also spent a few years of my life in the French military. And therefore, I really have that security angle front and center, because I know that Russia does have that energy angle front and center when they're trying to attack us directly or indirectly. So where do we go from there? I'm going to just end on that and talk about financing later. But we need to have a proper planning. Where do we want our big renewable electricity generation unit to be? And geographically, that's mostly offshore wind. A lot of that, for instance, will be in the North Sea. Can we work together as Europeans, and by that I mean EU plus the other Europeans, in the case of the North Sea, especially Norway and the UK, to have a proper planning process? And consider that those specific locations that are suitable to offshore wind power can also become interconnectors between the Norwegian grid, the British grid, and the continental European grid, whether it's France, Netherlands, or Germany or Belgium. And then back with that planning process, have obviously the investment there, and make sure that all the investment that we do and all the planning that we do looks at what will be the situation in the future. And so that's why the discussion on electricity demand is key. Because if you have, for instance, the ArcelorMittal steel plant in Dunkirk that goes towards green hydrogen, you need to deliver. Like you need hundreds of megawatts of electricity cables to go to that specific location. And the same goes for other industrial sites all over Europe. But we also need to take into account the impacts of climate change. And there is a need to better embed climate change adaptation in the planning process. It's obviously not that relevant for the North Sea, but it's super relevant for the electricity lines that are inside Europe, and especially those that go through forest. And to understand that our electricity grid will also be more unstable in the future as a result of extreme weather events. And to be able to understand how we can adapt to climate change and how we can already prepare for the fact that in the future, we will also have those moments where we will need to put back online a lot of the electricity grid that was destroyed by hurricanes or forest fires. So there is a big challenge here, and what I urge you to do is to be more vocal in the short term to make sure that pro-European forces, all of them understand the need for electrification and do adopt the public policy that will increase electricity demand, but that you can also talk to us policymakers with that long-term view that is embedded in your culture, to think about future electricity generation, future electricity demand, but also climate change adaptation and what it requires us to do to make sure that we have an electricity grid that is truly future-proof.
Thank you. There are so many threads we could pick up on that. And thank you for doing that informal survey about electricity demand. And we're going to do another Slido in a little while. But that informal survey that he did on electricity demand is really telling. And I think that it's across the board. Many people think that electricity demand is increasing rapidly, largely due to the headlines these days. Every headline is about the data center growth, et cetera. And so there's this alarmist feel that power demand is through the roof right now. And then the reality is in Europe that it is not. And so I think that it is something, the IEA's come out with some recent data on that. And I think it's something that is worth reflecting on, that the reality versus what the numbers are showing us. But also thanks for bringing up these aspects about planning and strategic investment on both the supply side and the grid side. And I'm gonna now turn to Remy, who is here with us from the we'll do this. Oh, we're going to do the Slido right now. Okay, great. Let's do the Slido. Which topics are the most critical to address for a resilient supply chain in Europe? Okay, increased manufacturing capacity in the EU seems to be the clear winner, which is convenient because that is the topic. Great, thanks everybody. But I think it worth reflecting on you know the runner-ups there on long-term regulatory certainty and common specifications for grid equipment. All of these are important. Skilled workforce. I mean, everything here. You only got to choose one, so appreciate that the answer resonates with the panelists that we have here with us today. So I'm going to turn to Remy, who's with the EU's DSO entity. I think would be great if we could pick up on some of these themes about planning and strategic investment that were raised by Thomas, and to reflect on the progress that's been made on grid enhancements over the past year. Our theme of this round of questions is really on achievements and gaps. So if you could comment on how DSOs are going to be overcoming current investment blocks and what progress you've seen over the past year.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. The main enhancement for DSOs is that there is a DSO today on stage with you. If we look back to the 10th anniversary of ENTSO-E, 5 years later, there were no DSO on stage. So that's the main enhancement. We are all aware now that distribution is also crucial for the energy transition. And if we look back on the last mandate, we see significant progress within the Fit for 55 package, within the energy market design electricity market design reform, and of course within the Net Zero Industrial Act. Now you mentioned it, Thomas, as well. Grids are the cornerstone of the energy transition, distribution grid, of course, and transmission grid. And the beauty of this is the grid action plan. We fully welcome the grid action plan to have something coming from the Commission, putting the grid at the center. Of course, working for a DSO and also as a board member of the DSO entity, I cannot agree more on putting the grid at the cornerstone of the transition. It's also a huge responsibility for both of us, TSO and DSO. We have to work together to make this energy transition a success. We are already doing that. We are working on an equal footing, for example, on the network code. And we have developed 2 network codes, one on cybersecurity. You mentioned, Thomas, the fact that Russia is attacking us. Cybersecurity is the main threat for us. We have this strong network code on cybersecurity, and we are finalizing the network code on demand-side management. I will use a famous quote, maybe, but we are pretty sure, and we should fully agree, that there will be no transition without transmission, for sure. But without distribution, it will be an illusion. And it's easy to understand. It's easy to understand if you look at France. In France, 90% of the renewables are connected to the distribution grid. For a distribution company like Enedis, it means 1 connection every single minute. So without the distribution, an illusion. We are connecting this year, we will connect a bit more than 5 gigawatts of renewables. It means 1 million of renewables energy producer connected to the distribution grid. And on the top of that, of course, we do connect, the distribution companies do connect 100% of the charging stations for the cars. So we are delighted to see the distribution grid at the right place, the place we deserve within the grid action plan. There is 3 pillars we need to be careful with. First, it's finance. How to finance the investment we need. Of course, there is a tariff. The previous panel mentioned grid-friendly tariff, of course, should be sustainable for the customers as well. We are right now discussing the next tariff period with the French regulator. Grid-friendly and sustainable, it's not easy. It's not easy, but we will find a way. Of course, we also need, it was mentioned by the Commissioner Jorgensen, maybe to carefully look on how to mobilize the private finance to enhance the investments on the grid. Fully agree with that, and we will work with the TSOs, with the Commission on this. And saying that, I will not be that much popular, especially in this room. We need to carefully look at the Connecting European Facility funds. There is a lot of money in the Connecting European Facility funds. 95% of these funds are dedicated to the transmission grid. That's not fair. That's not balanced. It must change. And we will work on that to have a better usage of the Connecting European Facilities fund. So, finance, equipment. If we carefully look at the Grid for Speed study provided by Eurelectric, the number of transformers we do need will double in the coming years. We need to be sure to have the transformers, to have European transformers, and for that, there is the Action 13 of the Grid Action Plan, providing visibility to the manufacturers, helping them to forecast better what we need, and then to bring back the facilities within Europe. Crucial. It also means work on the standardization to have less specification. For an old, big DSO, it costs a lot to mention that we will change our standards, but it's a must. We need to simplify the way we design the equipment to be sure to have a simple way, and it will help definitely the equipment manufacturer. Last but not least, the skills. Maybe the next bottleneck is the skills. If you look at the French situation, if a company like Enedis is hiring all the technicians coming out the vocational school in France, so all of them are joining Enedis, we still miss 20%. Of course, they will not all of them join us. So that's an issue. With the French TSO RTE, we have launched the Grid School for the Energy Transition. The idea is to convince the youngest to join this vocational school and at the end to work for us. That's an idea. It will need the strong support of the Parliament, of the Commission, to be sure that we will not miss the skills we do need to succeed.
Thank you, and thanks for raising those 3 points of finance, manufacturing capacity, and skills. And I am going to pick up back on that theme of manufacturing capacity, since that was number 1 in our survey, and I'm going to turn to you, Jochen, to comment on from an equipment and technology manufacturer perspective. Over the past year, are there innovations or manufacturing shifts that you've seen that are supporting grid modernization? And Jochen's coming here in his capacity. Again, many of you are wearing multiple hats, but in his capacity as the president of T&D Europe.
Well, thank you very much for the question, for the opportunity to be here. I could easily connect to what the previous speaker saying 5 or 10 years ago, we most likely would not have been sitting here. And that's maybe also, I would say, one of the outcomes, not only, but certainly supported by the Grid Action Plan, that it has set as a framework that encouraged us to talk even more intensive to each other than we used to do before. And of course, under the pressure of the current situation, there are a lot of talks of people working out there, and I have to stress that many of the things we have been talking about in the end have to be made by people in real business at the front. But so coming to the capacity, yeah, that's it's very similar to what you say. You can smarten to a certain degree, but in the end, you need capacity. That applies both for grids and for factories. But building factories takes some time, and in the meantime, we have seen that this process is, I would say, in a very good swing. At the Copenhagen Infrastructure Forum, I said we have made a survey on all the public announcement of our members on factory capacity investments during the past 3 years, if I remember right, and these were at that time about 12 billion globally. I also have to mention, you said everyone in Europe has somehow the same targets. This can be broadened. We have the same process all over the world, which is also part of the situation we're in. So 12 billion investments, but they will take. Some of them have become effective already because very often we use the opportunity to expand capacity in existing factories, which usually goes much faster than building a new one. But nevertheless, we also need to bridge the time until these new capacities have become active and are available. And here, I think the Grid Action Plan and the workshops, the meetings that we had triggered by the Grid Action Plan were very helpful because they were an opportunity that we understood each other better. And well, if you read the Grid Action Plan, there are some headlines who, if you read it, you may think, well, this is the solution, the one solution, and no, we go ahead. Standardization played a very big role, a lot of hopes. In fact, we have to say, standards are not brand new. We have a well-established ecosystem of creating and using standards. So the additional potential of standardization in general may have been a little bit overestimated. But if you look into the details, if you look into harmonization of products, as you mentioned before, there are cases where it makes sense. But in order to find them, and also in order to avoid creating unnecessary effort on the other side, we really need to talk to each other. Where does it offer efficiency gains? Because that's what we are talking about. We are not talking only about factory capacity. We are also talking about using the people smarter, working in these factories, in tendering processes, in procurement, in sales, in engineering. Whatever we can simplify there delivers an immediate relief of capacity, and by that, better deliveries, faster deliveries. And here you need to make people talk to each other, understand each other. We saw an example, which I would like to refer to in your introductory statement, power transformer factory acceptance test. Today we are facing a variety between 2 and 6 weeks of procedures defined by the buyer. It's the same transformer with the same functionality in the grid, and the test field in a power transformer factory usually is one of the bottlenecks. So there, it's certainly an opportunity to challenge whether that makes sense or not. And what we found out in this cooperation is one important piece is making people talk about these details. We have to collect all these details. They offer fast-track relief. And at the same time, as I said before, our industry, after some hesitance, we also have to say, it's not the first time that we saw great announcements in plans. It required some time that our people gained trust and confidence that this will really take place. That's why there was an initial delay in taking actions, but we're over that now. And the collaboration in the Grid Action Plan also contributed to that. That both sides, I think, understood better why and how certainty needs to be provided, what type of forecast are helpful for us, and as it was said before, are we done? No. I would say the Grid Action Plan, the first 12 months are the beginning of a journey. We have to continue working on it. We also have to operationalize, for instance, industrial demand forecasts in order to even further increase the confidence of our decision makers to build even more factories. But in principle, I would say, we can say today the process has taken off. we are on a good way. And the grid action plan was, as a framework, very helpful. And I can only agree. We very often said in the workshops, there's a lot that our industries can do together without needing legal help. And there will be cases where we will reach out and ask for help. The public procurement guidelines were mentioned. It's an obvious example, but a lot of the things can also be done among the industries.
Thank you. I have one final question, so everybody gets a chance at the beginning, and then we're going to go to a rapid round because we're running low on time. So I'm going to turn to you, Volker, to provide a comment on, let's, again, our focus right now is achievements and gaps. Can you comment on what are you doing in the capacity of Secretary General of Europa Cable? What are you doing to deliver the equipment that's needed?
Kristen, thank you very much. Good afternoon. Look, very simple. Investing, delivering, and collaborating. Investing, let's play off from was it 63 or 64? I don't know. For Europa Cable, the European cable manufacturers have made announcements of over 4 billion euros, which will more than double our capacity by 2030. Let's play on from what Jochen mentioned. This is not a projection into the future. It is happening today. Examples, Sweden. NKT is very proud, if you just look at the last couple of weeks, they have completed the building of a 200-meter high extrusion tower. They did this in 90 days. They added 2.6 meters in height every single day, and with that, they're now very proud because this is the second tallest building in all of the Nordics. Nexans, similar story. Extrusion tower completed in height 152 meters. They're even prouder because it is the highest building in Norway and the only building that qualifies as a skyscraper. That is on adding capacity. Yes, Jochen, you're right. It will take time, but we're on it. There is not only capacity for producing more cables, there's also the need to install them. If you look at the European manufacturers, all of them have announced the ground laying activities of more new vessels to install submarine power cables, which will carry more capacity. They will be able to go at greater depth. They will be able to operate and maneuver in rougher seas to install the cables, and they will be more sustainable. So we're on it. The good news, I think, from a cable perspective, which really I would like to point out, is you see other debates of electrification, where industry still needs to innovate. They still need to come up with new technologies. They still need to found new companies and build brand new companies. For the cable perspective, we've got good news because Europe is home to the world's leading cable manufacturers. Yeah? We have the technology, we have the know-how, we have the expertise, we have the people, and we have capacity. So all we need to do is ramp up. A final point then is delivering. I think also that is important to note. While we're building capacity, we're also delivering. Again, really just good news, which I think need to be noted. If you look at Germany, TenneT and TransnetBW over the last 2 weeks announced that for the first time, 525 kV HVDC cables are being pulled into the critical corridor projects of Südlink and Südostlink. Look, this is a world-class innovation. We've never done this before. Equally, TenneT completed, and congratulations to that, the Wale-Mekla line, a 380 kV AC line, 210 kilometers. It was mentioned here before, public acceptance. To me, this is a brilliant example of innovative new technologies because what they did is they had 190 kilometers of overhead lines, and in sensitive areas, they completed it and complemented it with partial undergrounding to get the line approved quicker. So that's delivering. And in terms of collaboration, Damien, thank you very much for leading our work to the announcement today. We're all in, to deliver for the Copenhagen Infrastructure Forum. And as has been said by Jochen before, from a cable perspective, on standardization, we've got everything in place. The standards are there at IEC and SIGRA level, and clearly they're working well because the cables which are out there meet, unless there's external damages, their lifetime expectations. Where we see we can really improve, but for this we need to come together, is on the rollout. Develop common approaches on testing, pre-qualification, develop common approaches on procurement. Here we can increase efficiencies, we can reduce redundancies, And that will, exactly as Jochen said, this will save time and it will free up a capacity of people working on this. So this, to me, investing, delivering, and collaboration are the three items that we deliver at the moment.
Thank you for that message about building and delivering at the same time, and that we have everything that we need to get going on that. We're going to shift focus. The earlier panel, we heard quite a bit about the next commission and the vision and the recommendations that are out there. What I'd like to hear now is more about the big ideas and sharing your forward-looking ideas in terms of how to help accelerate the EU Grid Action Plan, but also this thread about competitiveness. And I'm going to turn to you, Thomas. We had an interesting conversation before this started about some of your ideas about how to help Europe become more competitive.
So a part of my thinking here comes back to what happened in the previous decade, in the 2010 decade, where we saw the interest of Chinese investors to invest inside the European energy system, buying, for instance, becoming one Chinese company becoming the biggest shareholder of EDP, which is a utility that was, maybe still is, the global leader in hydropower technology. But also trying to buy different distribution or transport system operators, partially succeeded in Italy with Terna, being blocked, thankfully, by the German government when it came to the 50 Hertz TSO in the north of Germany. So we are in a situation where we need to have more investment going to the electricity grid, but also in a situation where obviously more Chinese investment would be at least something to discuss politically. And something that could be problematic because those are strategic, assets, and Chinese investment therefore would pose a strategic question, at least for us to be answered. And on top of that, even if China was, let's say, a reliable ally for Europe, which is not, at least at the moment, there is Trump in the US that will use any kind of Chinese investment in Europe as a way to blackmail us. You may be familiar with this from the tech sector, but that is something also that Trump will use in the electricity grid. So to me, that's a massive concern. How do we tackle that? There are stuff that we're currently discussing in the European Parliament on foreign direct investment. It's general. It's not specifically applied for electricity grid, but that would also obviously apply to the electricity grid. But I think one way to let's say avoid that obstacle is simply to make sure that we've got EU equity investment in the electricity grid. Currently, what do we have to support in terms of public support to electricity grid investment? There is obviously loans. I'm guessing a lot of the projects that were discussed are at least or could be financed with the EIB, the European Investment Bank. There is obviously the Connecting Europe facility that was mentioned, and obviously as Social Democrats, but together with our Christian Democrats and Liberal Democrats friends in the European Parliament, we are fighting for a bigger EU budget, actually successfully for next year. We're going to have a 4 billion increase of the EU budget. So that's positive. And among the priority areas, there is obviously Horizon Europe and Erasmus, but also Connecting Europe facility, especially for the electricity grid. And Connecting Europe facility, I mean, we want a bigger envelope for that, to have more subsidies, of course. But obviously, this is not the magnitude of the investment that is required. And I think we should have an adult conversation on EU equity investment. Could the EU invest every year a few billion euros in equity investment in several TSOs? I think the positive thing is that will allow those TSOs to do investment without creating too much debt. Obviously, that's in the end up to the choice of a TSO to decide to what extent you want to finance a project with debt or with equity. That's obviously for the TSO to choose, but at least to have that option of having EU equity investment. And from the EU perspective, this to me would bring two positive developments. The first one is that, and which is purely financial, it will lead to new EU own resources for the budget. because obviously when you have equity investment, you become a shareholder, and therefore you can benefit from the dividends that a natural monopoly like a TSO can create, and that would be beneficial in order to have a new funding resource for the EU budget. And that funding resource obviously could be more revenues would allow us to have a bigger Connected Europe facility, of course. So that would be, let's say, a virtuous circle. And the second thing, which is more on the governance, that would also lead some EU actor, which could be the European Commission, could also be the European Investment Fund, or some other actor to be created, to be active in TSOs also as a shareholder. So not only the EU acting as a regulator and as a coordinator, but also as a shareholder, to make sure that we have more cooperation between TSOs, and therefore that we can achieve in the long term, here I'm talking like 20, 30 years or more, achieve something that we need, which is a fully integrated electricity grid. And to me, that's one of the proposals I'm putting here in the debate, which I think would be an interesting way to look at the type of EU public support for transport investment. So
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing that vision and bold ideas about an integrated energy system of the future, but with EU equity investment. We are running out of time here, but I am going to give an opportunity for each of the remaining panelists from the different associations to share one big idea, right? One forward-looking idea that you have that's beyond the recommendations that are already on the table from the previous panel. So you have 30 seconds each to share your one big idea. I'm gonna open the floor. Who would like to go first?
Don't over-regulate.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Don't over-regulate. You know, Volker, how to make cable. Johan, you know how to make switchgear. Johannes, you know how to run a transmission grid. I assume we do know how to run a distribution grid. So don't over-regulate. Provide us, dear Thomas, stability and a clear vision, and we will meet. We will be there. Don't over-regulate.
Thank you, Remy. Okay, next big idea from Volker.
Let's ensure a fair and market level playing field. Let's use FSR. My industry has been burned. We have had Chinese overcapacity being dumped on optical fiber cables into the European Union, 88% of duties. There's massive Chinese overcapacity on power cables. Europe is the only remaining open market. Please, let's make sure that we continue to have a global technology leadership of cable makers in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you, Volker. Okay, please.
Thank you. Let's be radical about simplifications. I know this is perhaps a little bit controversial in a room full of engineers which love technical complexities, but let's be radical. Let's make things simple. And remember, I believe that the risk of over-investing is a lot smaller than the risk of under-investing. So let's make it simple. Let's make some bold decisions, and I'll leave it with that as we stand between you and your lunch.
And Jochen.
Well, I will add a totally different thing. Although, of course, I could also say something about securing the industrial knowledge we have and competence, but I would like to, we are now talking a lot about the urgent pressure we are under to deliver. But at that time, we should not forget to define where we want to go. Let's develop together how this system should be operated at the end of the journey and make sure that everything we need for that is rolled out in time. Because we are talking about a system that in the end needs to be balanced with hundreds of millions of distributed elements. We are not working on that yet. And if we don't start rolling out the required infrastructures early enough, then we will be in a very ugly reactive mode in the end. And let us try to avoid that. Be proactive and at the same time doing the urgent things and the important things, which humans usually are not so good in. But we can be better.
Can I just add? 30 seconds as a call for action. So just yesterday in the European Parliament, we agreed to have an own initiative report of the European Parliament on the electricity grid. We agreed that it would be led by an MEP from the Renew Group, which is a positive news because it's a pro-European political family. So I urge you to come up with your ideas, both, let's say, the banal ones, but also the bold ones to the European Parliament, so we can have, as MEPs, an informed discussion and hopefully use that initiative report as a way to provide what is needed in terms of predictability, political predictability for the next 2 or 3 decades.
That's a great call to action, and with that, I just want to add one of the themes that we've been talking about is just those policies and the collaborations that can help support a strengthened business and economic case. And when talking about that economic case, really thinking through both the direct and the indirect benefits. I want to thank all of the panelists for your contributions to this discussion and to the audience. I'm sorry we didn't get to questions, but appreciate that we were able to do a couple of surveys in this dialogue, and looking forward to connecting with all of you during the rest of the day. Thank you.